Colin Dixon with nScreenMedia, and I'm speaking with Derek Chang, CEO of Friend MTS, about the Video Security Summit on October 19th and 20th, which I'm doing with Steve Hawley of Piracy Monitor. So we hope you can join us. And Friend, we're delighted because Friend MTS is sponsoring that event. But Derek, I'm really excited to talk to you. So why don't you tell us a little bit about why you're interested in the security conference, but more importantly, give us you have a tremendous background in traditional media, traditional television media, which you brought to Friend MTS. Give us some of the business cases why industry should be taking security a lot more seriously.
Sure. It's great to be here, Colin. I'm looking forward to the summit that, as you said, we are sponsoring. So looking forward to working with you on that. I guess, if you look at my background, as you say, I've had a pretty extensive history in media and sports, paid television, all of that. I think I'm, at this point, probably considered a dinosaur in the industry. But I think the one thing that having been in and around this industry for so long is you actually understand the economics behind the industry. And there's just a lot of money that is spent on content, whether it's the production of the content, the distribution of it, the sale of it. And so I think when we think about sort of anti-piracy and what you're trying to protect, the core of a lot of people's business is this content. And so if you are not securing that content, that has the tendency to then sort of undermine your business and certainly the financials behind the business. And so I think that in itself is a key reason why, for me, this is so interesting, because having, again, either bought content, sold content. I think when I was at DirecTV running content there, my budget was probably, over $10 billion a year. So that was just one player, in the ecosystem. So there's tens, hundreds of billions of dollars out there in terms of content value. And so how do we sort of, why is this important? Well, again, every step of the way, there is potential for improving your business, frankly, if you can protect your content, right? I mean, this is like, a lot of people get sort of starry-eyed because they sit there and they say their eyes glaze over because it's technology and how does this work and why is it important? How do you stop it from happening? I mean, if you take it into the physical world and you sit there and you go, if you make, widgets, you produce widgets, distribute widgets, sell widgets, every step of the way, you're the production facility, you're locking that down. The trucks that you distribute it on, you're locking those. You take them to a warehouse and where you store them, you're locking those. You take them to a retail store, you sell them. That store gets locked. You've got locks, you've got security cameras, you've got alarms. I mean, the distribution electronically of content, it's no different in terms of what you're trying to do. And so where it starts to get, complicated is, I think a lot of people, different people, certainly in a traditional distribution world where you've got a content producer, owner, and then you've got a different distribution platform, there are multiple points where the content's getting handled and there's potential leakage or theft of that content. And so what's complicating there is, can any one player really unilaterally sort of change the dynamic? And it's always been a little bit challenging because of those multiple points of potential failure. And I think the other thing you deal with is within companies who handle the content, it may or may not be a priority. And it may not be a priority because people have other things to do. It may not be a priority because of what I just said. That company may not feel they on their own can actually tackle the problem, right? And so what's interesting to me about that is these companies that deal with content, and again, speaking from a DirecTV standpoint, a distribution platform, I mean, the amount of time and energy that we would spend on subscriber acquisition, subscriber retention, thinking about the percentages and basis points of how you make little movements here and there and spending millions and tens of millions of dollars on it. And all that was a calculus because there was a financial performance that comes out of it. This is no different, right? You're paying a lot for this content. And to the extent the content's getting pirated, that's a potential subscriber that you didn't bring onto your platform, or that's a potential subscriber that you lost from your platform.
Yeah.
So when you think about it in those terms, I think it makes it a little bit easier to understand. And I think that the other thing that, as we go in a world of sort of corporate compliance and you go from SOX on the financial compliance side to, cybersecurity. Look, if you're an executive, if you're a board member, if you're a shareholder, you care about this stuff, or you should care about this stuff, right? It's no different than any other asset of the company that's getting diminished somehow. And if you're not sort of putting the wherewithal behind it to protect it, then that's a core responsibility of what you should be doing.
So this can be very daunting, right? And I think this is why a lot of companies only sort of do the bare minimum, because the technology itself is very daunting, very daunting. So give us a hint. How do I get started to really improve the content protection that I'm providing for the content that I'm delivering?
I think a part of it is prioritization, right? And again, I think there's a little bit of this sort of, I can't solve it alone. My business partner, who may be the content owner and I'm the distributor, we need to work on it together, but we've got multiple other things that we have to work on together. So this isn't a priority. But, you take it back to like a practical life example, right? If you have a homeowners association and you've got 10 homes around a block and you're sharing a street, right? If that street starts to deteriorate, it's not any one person's problem that street is deteriorating, but it's incumbent upon all of you to get together and fix it.
And do something,
So this isn't a lot different than a practical situation like that.
So how do I go about picking a partner to help me do that?
Look, I think the easiest thing, there are certain folks in the industry that probably are leaning more forward into this than others, right? And I think they're trying. I think others need to sort of get on that bandwagon with them. And I think part of it comes through the whole discussion around the value of the content, the negotiation around what rights are being transferred and passed on, and what your responsibilities are to protect that. And that sort of, again, is a concept all the way through the ecosystem. So you're finding like-minded people. I think it's one of these things where if the momentum starts to build, and instead of everyone on the outside sort of looking in, you've got more people on the inside, then the others on the outside will start to join. And it does take an impact like that. We need to show how sort of the technology, the products, the services are actually working. And people within these organizations, and it's not just, look, a lot of these organizations have fantastic anti-piracy groups. They don't always get heard at the highest levels in these companies. And if they can get heard and, the CFO can buy in as to why this has positive financial impact by pursuing some of these courses of action, then I think you start to see movement. And I think that's been a hard thing for people to do, because often there's the intuitive, this is making a difference. Sometimes the tangible isn't quite there.
Yeah.
And so it's definitely easier to see when you have a subscription-based service or, say a pay-per-view event or something like that, because you've got historic sort of benchmarks, and then you impose the technology and you can see sort of immediate impact. So we need to be able to demonstrate those sorts of results for folks. But again, I think everyone understands it actually intuitively, that you've got an industry, as I said earlier, that's hundreds of billions of dollars of value.
Yeah.
Anytime you have industries with that much value, you've probably got people trying to take from that.
Yeah.
And so you just apply whatever percentages you want, and you probably come up with a pretty big number.
Your
right?
example, I really like that example you gave of the street where everybody's got to pull together to sort of protect the street. I think it's like that with sports and piracy, right? It's not about any one particular solution. It's about a suite. You really need to protect the whole street, not just one house. So it's an end to end. You really need a business, a media business framework for protection, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah. And look, I think, again, certain things start to move this down the road. You've got certain participants who are leaning forward. So I think that helps. I think some of these business models, as they change, right, as companies, as there's a proliferation of direct-to-consumer businesses, you now have sort of a single entity that controls it end to end from the production ownership of the content all the way to the distribution to the end user. So there can't be as much of this sort of finger pointing of, no, that's your responsibility. No, that's your responsibility, right? It is my responsibility. I own it end to end. So therefore I can impact it also end to end by what sort of content protection I'm putting on all the way through the distribution path. And so I think that hopefully gives people more incentive. I think the other thing that's changing is the technology itself to deliver the video. As we move to much more of a digital environment versus a traditional environment, I think upgrading applications and the software and stuff like that happens at a much quicker pace. So you have many more opportunities to get in there and actually install the technology. And I think it's a much lighter footprint than it might have been in the past, and how much storage. I used to have huge discussions with my engineers at DirecTV because they had only so much storage in a set-top box, and they only sort of upgraded the software every so often, and so many different competing priorities that every time you wanted a new feature, it was like an Armageddon type sort of discussion. Here, I think systems now, as we move forward, much more flexible and much more adaptable. And so I think putting the applications in there is probably a lot easier to do.
Yeah. In the last minute or so here, what sort of words of advice do you have for the media industry about piracy and security?
I would just say, the rate of change is happening at a much faster rate than it ever has. These business models continue to get sort of modified, evolved as we move along. You see it from all of the origination of all these direct-to-consumer businesses. And, right now everyone's hyper-focused on subscriber growth, just like we used to be in the old days in cable television and satellite. It's these D2C businesses, everyone wants sub growth. At a certain point, the business matures. And then you go to more sort of tactical measures like subscriber churn. You go to things like, where can you improve the financial performance? And this is, one significant way that you can continue to do it. So take advantage of sort of the technology and what it allows you to do in terms of the specific anti-piracy technology, but take advantage of the technological systems that you yourself are deploying to distribute the content. Because they're more flexible now, much more integratable, much easier, take advantage of these opportunities to go ahead and upgrade your systems, your anti-piracy systems at the same time you're upgrading whatever other systems you're using to deploy your content. It's a great opportunity.
Yeah. And that, of course, is where Friend MTS comes in, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Derek, this has been great. I can't wait to hear what else Friend MTS is up to at the security conference on October 19th and 20th. So thank you very much for talking with us. And I hope everybody will join me, Steve Hawley, and Friend MTS at the Video Security Conference. Derek, thank you so much.
Thank you, Colin. Look forward to seeing you.
This has been Colin Dixon with nScreenMedia.